It's Helping the Brave. Today we are live. Thank you. I guess I talked too soon, but Helping the Brave. We're here to talk about veterans issues and transitioning, whatever they need, we're here for them. And if you know a veteran out there who needs to hear some of this, please have them start watching us live or go to our podcast afterwards on YouTube. And if you are on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and share. And I'm Ed Parco, your host, and Matt Mohawk Denny, or Mohawk Matt Denny, whatever you want to call him. Just don't call him late for dinner.
Exactly.
Like me. And Kristen Babick.
Hi.
Okay. And then our guest today is, I'm going to try to get this right, the Farron. And what's your last name, Farron?
It's Dozier.
Dozier. Man, you're in the wrong business with that
name. No doubt.
You should be in the spy game. MI6, man, right there. So we always, we have guests that come on, and normally we go and find them. And you were the first one who found us,
really?
And we appreciate it. Yeah. Well, this is our what live? How many was
10 total?
10, not lives, not lives.
No, lives were at 6, but we haven't edited the first 4 because we haven't had time.
Yeah. So, and why we decided to go live was we had a gentleman on telling his story, and I'm like, this needs to be out there. More people can connect, talk to them, ask questions, the whole 9 yards. And then so our first live was, I think, Anthony Stephen Malone, which that was just a jaw dropper. So if you haven't seen that one, you should see that one. That guy was in prison he went undercover in prison, supposed to be 3 months. He was there for 3 years in Turkey, and he is the one who found where bin Laden was, so that the SEAL team could go find him. So there's the guy out there making all the money that shot him, right? This guy should be out there making all the money because he's the one that found him. Wow. So, and he was in prison. So,
well, and that's Ed's reason for going live. My reason was I'm the guy that had to edit it, and I didn't want to edit him anymore. So, going live.
Yeah, but I mean, you say that's fine. It's easier because it goes right to YouTube. We don't have to do anything, but we get more people response, and more people can find us. They know we're here Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2:30 Pacific time, and then they can find us each week. If they can't be here, they could actually come back and listen to them afterwards, even on YouTube or anywhere. So I'm thank you all for being part of this. And Farron, why don't you tell us your story?
So again, Farron Dozier, spent 24 years in the military.
You're not that old.
Yeah, I'll be 51 tomorrow, actually.
Jesus.
You look really young.
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Are you serious?
I'll be 51 tomorrow.
No, I thought you were like 29.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
Happy early birthday.
I saw all his pictures.
Thank
I'm
you.
like, there's no way this guy he's got to be medically retired, because there's no way he can be
retired
because he looks too young.
Yeah, I'm medical retired and I'm young.
What's your skin regimen? Send it over this way.
Those DNA genes.
There you go.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So
I want to see his birth certificate. I think he's lying. I want to see that birth certificate.
Why would I lie about that?
Why would you lie about being older? You'd be
right. Exactly.
He's trying to get he wanted the AARP discount. That's right.
Hey, I'm looking for that 55 one though. Hey, I get to eat off the back of the menu.
There you go. All right. Well, sorry for interrupting, but
it's okay. No, it's okay. So 24 years, medical retired, forced out because of an experience of exertional sickling is what they call it, and had no idea that inherited gene could cause health complications or close to sudden death. So joined the military at age 19. My uncle was in the Air Force. That's who inspired me to join the service. He asked me what was I going to do when I graduated high school. I wasn't sure. So I saw he was in the Air Force Reserve. So he was like, why don't you try the reserves? If you like it, you could always go active duty. But if you go active duty first and you don't like it, you're stuck with that contract. So I was like, all right, cool. So I initially signed up to go join the Air Force, took my ASVAB and all that. And that day I went back, they told me that I couldn't join the Air Force. And so they said I could join any other branch, but not the Air Force. And I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. I was 19. So I go home and a National Guard recruiter calls me and wants to come by the house. So I invite him over. He offers me like $2,000 bonus, said that I would do 1 week in a month. Yeah, he got me with the money. So do the state emergency stuff. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in a year. I'm like, all right, I'll try that. So I did that, and I ended up enjoying it. I mean, I loved it. I loved the experience. At 19, where our brains are real malleable. So basic training, I took on everything that they taught us to survive. Even the relationships of, if you're supposed to have a wife, we'll issue you a wife, like all that stuff. Because I heard them say, like, if you're daydreaming about what's going on at home with your girlfriend or your wife, you could get your whole squad killed because you're not paying attention to what's going on. So I believed, I believe, and I took it all in. I remember that about the third week, I was laying on that top bunk, and we got done with some maneuvers and stuff, and I'm laying in bed like, what am I doing here? And then it's like my brain clicked, and it became from that civilian to that soldier, and it was a wrap, and it became like a routine. And like I said, I enjoyed it. Joined the National Guard unit, was in, I guess I'll tell this, like I told you. I initially joined to be a medic, and I was at Fort Sam Houston. And the last 2 weeks of the course, we were playing a flag football team against the different companies. And I went out for a pass and got tripped up with the guy and hit my head on the ground and ended up having a concussion. And so got recycled twice because I just couldn't function. And they called my unit and said, hey, look, we're either going to send him home or you have to reclass him because I didn't make it through the last 2 weeks of being a medic, which was the IV portion. I just had bad headaches and stuff. So the unit said, well, we have a POL slot, fuel handler position. So they offered it to me. I'm like, I'll take it, driving trucks and pumping fuel, whatever. And so I went to Fort Lee and completed that MOS. And then that started my journey as a National Guardsman. Had a great experience with that 2 weeks. Like I said, I was a citizen soldier, so I had a job and I was going to do that on the weekends. But a part of me was like, I want to do this full time. And so I happened to go into my unit, and they had a bulletin board that had AGR positions, active guard reserve positions. And so I grabbed the clipboard, and there was a supply clerk, E4, and I'm like, I could probably do this. And so I asked the readiness NCO, hey, how do I apply for this job? He's like, well, all this list of stuff right here, plus this one is due in 2 days. So I was like, you know what? So I went home, I gathered everything that I needed. I submitted my packet in 2 days, and that was 93 Christmas. 94 of March, I got a notification that I was for an interview to be AGR. And right when that happened, there was a freeze. And so I became AGR in 94 of July.
Wait a minute. So in 1994, you were only like 10 though. So
I was 24. I was probably 14, your age.
I'm not 20. Thank you for calling me 24, but geez.
So
you think Matt's being nice throwing you up front there? He's trying to eat his fries.
Oh, is that what he's doing?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, we can see him down here. We're at admin, him and I, and we can see what he's doing. Nobody else can.
That's cold, man. That's cold.
Hey, I'm sorry. Would you like one? It's been a long day, man. This is the fourth live I've been on so far. So,
and Farron, he's in DC.
Oh, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm in California, Modesto, and Kristen's in Texas, Houston, Texas.
That's cool. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and with our other host is not here right now. She's in North Carolina.
You guys got it covered.
Try to cover the whole world.
Well, and that's what's cool. It's not just geolocation, but it's also the different experiences. Ed got out 20 years ago. I got out 10 years ago.
We'll just say 20 plus.
I was being nice. I was being nice.
I look 50.
Hey, you said it. I didn't.
I got out 10 years ago. Chloe's active duty, and Kristen's our civilian motivated passion lover for the veterans. So
that's a cool deal, Kristen.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
So that's if you have any more questions, but that's where that's the start of my AGR career. And then so I did that, and then I took that job as a supply clerk So I went to school to be a supply. And then doing that, the organization next door to me said, hey, we got an E5 slot in San Bernardino for a mechanic admin person, but you got to go to mechanic school. And I'm like, where is that at? So San Bernardino from LA is like 65 miles, 70 miles east. So I'm like, never been out there. I don't know what you're talking about. But I wanted the promotion. So I went to mechanic school. So I became a 91 Bravo, 63 hotel back then because it was track vehicle repair, and transferred to become an admin for that unit as a detachment sergeant. And from there, I was transferred to Michigan to be a supply sergeant for infantry company, Alpha 125. And then ended up coming back to California. So I bounced around with my AGR career.
How many job series did you change?
So I have 3 MOSs total.
Okay.
So I have the supply, the track vehicle repair, and the fuel handler. Yeah. So lived in the field.
Do you do any of those three things now?
No.
No.
I take all my cars to the dealership because I don't want to touch another wrench.
That's why you look so young.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so no, I don't do any of those MOSs, especially after my injury from my exertion from the trait. So
you want to explain that, or do you talk about that at all?
Yeah. So in 2006, I just came off deployment 0405. We were at Irwin training Iraqi soldiers and our soldiers together because they were attacking the car bombs. I mean, they were attacking the convoys and the mechanics during that time frame. So they activated us to go and do that training. So that was 05, 04, 05, 06. I got done with that deployment and I went to my next duty station. I got promoted to E7. And so I was going to, they called it ANOC back then. And so 2006, I'm at Camp Roberts, got up that morning to do the physical fitness test, the push-ups, sit-ups, and then I got out to do the 2-mile run. And that last lap, we're trained to sprint that last lap. So in my mind, I hear the instructor 15:45, 15:46. So I'm like, okay, cool. So let me get this run over with for my best time. Cross the finish line, 16 minutes, put my hands over my head to get air in my lungs, all the stuff we're trained to do. And then all of a sudden my peripheral got dark. And I'm like, man, I don't feel well. And so I kneeled down, closed my eyes because I felt nauseous. And then everything was spinning like 1,000,000 miles an hour when I opened my eyes. So they rushed me to the hospital. Medics came and got me. Doctor brings me in, puts an IV and says, you ever had kidney problems? I says, no. He says, what do you do now? And then he walks out. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? So he comes back and says, you know what? Freak accident. You're probably dehydrated, heat stroke. I'm going to give you another IV. Go back to the barracks. Take the rest of the day off. You should be fine. So I go back to the barracks, the school gave me the day off. I woke up mid-afternoon and I was worse. Everything was still spinning. I was throwing up, almost crapped on myself, like in a real bad state. I'll go back to sleep. Of course, it's 16:30 because my classmates come back in the barracks and they see me on the bunk and I'm like, I need to go back to the hospital. So they rush me back to the doctor. So the night doctor does some more tests and he sees that my creatinine kinase levels are like 12,000. And so at that time I was 36. They should have been about 150, but they were like 12,000. So the renal failure that the doctor saw in the morning is what was happening to my kidneys. So I was actually having renal failure, kidney failure by the nighttime. They were both about 50% each with a condition called rhabdomyolysis. It happens a lot with CrossFit. It seems to show up around a lot with that. People exert themselves. So again, it wasn't sickle cell trait connected then in 06. They send me home. I spent 4 days in the hospital, could barely walk, muscle fatigue, joint damage, vertigo, a lot of secondary health issues. My CK levels came down to like 600. And so they allowed me to go home, came back to my regular doctor to figure out what happened to me. We spent 2 years trying to figure out what caused that condition. Wow. And by that time, he's like, you just can't run. Like I get on the treadmill and it felt like I was like on a roller coaster ride when I got done. So we agreed that I couldn't run anymore. So I'm like, okay, cool. We have different events. I'll do the walk or the bicycle. the myth is real. I don't swim. So I was like, I'm not doing the swim. So I'll do the walk or the bicycle or something. So we turned that paperwork in, and the doctors, they were like, oh no, like you can't exercise. You can't do anything until we figure out what happened to you. I'm like, dude, that's like almost 2.5 years ago. I just can't run. So they stopped me from doing anything, gave me a P4 profile. So couldn't carry a weapon, like couldn't do anything until they started their medical process. And during that time, my body just started to shut down. My knees started hurting, my back, my shoulders, my arms, my hands. And that was 09 of September. By January 1st of 2010, I was stiff as a table, like I couldn't walk. And so I started going to sick call to find out, what was going on. And the doctors and nurses were like, we don't know what to do. Here's some Motrin, here's some Skittles. Take that.
Change your socks, man.
Yeah, yeah, right. Like here. So for almost the whole month of January, I kept going to the hospital, and the nurse says, you know what? You should go to UCLA Medical Center because they have specialists there. So when the clinic closes here, go to UCLA emergency and check in. And so I did that, and they deemed me with arthritis at that point because my whole body was inflamed. So at that point, I'm now dealing with physical pain, and of course the mental stuff started to kick in. I happen to be on the military base now, the Air Force base, and doing mental health appointments. And the officer that I served with during the deployment, I was a platoon sergeant. He was a platoon leader. I hadn't seen him for 5 years, and we passed each other on the base. And he's like, "How you been?" I'm like, "You don't want to know." He's like, "Tell me." I'm like, "Man, my muscles, I could barely walk. I'm in these freaking mental health appointments." And he's like, "You know what? Something like that happened to me where my muscles locked up. But I have sickle cell trait. So I have to drink extra water, take these vitamins." And I'm like, "Why does that sound familiar?" And I'm like, "I think I have that." So I go back in the clinic and I get a printout of that physical from 1999. And sure enough, positive sickle cell trait. So I go home, I do my research, and I find that military personnel had been collapsing and dying since the 80s. Athletes have collapsed and died from sickle cell trait exertion playing sports. And so I took that to my rheumatologist at UCLA, and I'm like, "Hey, you need to look at this." And so she did. She retested my blood again. Sure enough, 40% of my red blood cells are the S gene. And so with that research, she was able to connect my health issues, and that day that I collapsed at the school was part of the trigger of sickle cell trait exertion with rhabdo. And so when the military got a hold of that, it was a wrap. They were like, "Oh yeah, you're done." And so it took them from 2010 until 2013 for them to officially, with my appeals, to give me the boot and medical retire me out. So the transition for me was very challenging because I made that mean my life was over. And so looking back at all the work that I've done to try to keep my life alive and peeling off those layers, like I could see like where my mind was and what kind of triggered those thoughts. And being able to communicate with veterans with my experience and listen to veterans, it's like, we're not different. Like that transition is challenging, especially when you have your identity in that camouflage. And so as I started to peel off my life and starting to look at where, these anxiety and depression came from, I took a course called Landmark Education. It's a personal development course, globally. And that program saved my life because it teaches you the study of human beings on how to, human beings and the functions of the brain and how we make decisions and how we give meaning to life. And when I started looking through those principles, I saw the day that it happened. Like when I opened up that email and I saw my name with pending discharge next to it, when I read that, my mind said, "Oh, your life is over." And from that moment, I would be at work. And when that phone rang, it was like, is this the call that's going to end my career? So you can imagine the spiraling out of life. And then the brain is so powerful, it looks for evidence in life. So I started finding proof that my marriage failed because my life is over. Well, this happened. My car broke down because my life is over. Like I found all the evidence that I needed to be like, you know what? I'd be better off dead. What happens if I jump off the roof? Maybe I'll land on my feet. I kept a 350 or 370Z because I wanted to go fast. When I decided to take my life, I wanted to go in my favorite car. And so I kept that car to commit suicide in. And the one thing that I could tell you that kept me from doing that was my youngest daughter, because I never had stress. Like my stress was left on the basketball court. Like I never had it. But when I couldn't exercise anymore, I didn't have another outlet. So I couldn't go to the gym. I couldn't play basketball. So I internalized all of that stuff. And so, but I knew I had no stress before. Like I knew how to manage my stress, but the decision that my life was over was the battle, started to be the battle. But I knew if I wouldn't want to take my life because of I have 3 daughters, but my youngest daughter, I held on to her. Like, you can't do that. Like, I know you're stronger than this, Farron. I know you can beat this. I know you're stronger. So I held on to my daughter to keep myself from not taking my life. And then with that education, it showed me how we make up decisions, and the decisions that I made about my military career, but also the decisions that I made about my parents. So then when you start to get to the core of why we behave the way we behave, a lot of things are from our first line of our communication as children is our parents. And there is a natural break in communication from child to dad and child to mom. And it's it's inevitable. And unless your parents are educated to notice it and catch it, that child makes up their own script about what happens in the family. That's why they say children are really devastated during divorce, because a lot of times we blame ourselves for the marriage failing. And so those are the things that happen to us as children. So not only did I start to manage my transition out of service, but I started to get a whole new relationship with my parents. And by doing that, that also gave me a level of freedom. Like the things that I thought about my parents, they really loved me. Like, they did the best they could with what they had. But as a child, as a 5-year-old, you don't know what it is to be an adult. As an 8-year-old, you don't know what it is to be an adult. As a 16-year-old, then I looked at, hell, at 25, I didn't even know what it is to be an adult. So when I looked at that from those principles and I reflected on my parents, something just shifted in my life, and it gave me a whole nother level of peace, because I did love my dad and my dad did love me. My mom never did abandon me. I was a latchkey kid in 1978. There was no babysitters. I had to come home by myself because that was the era. But an 8-year-old made it mean that she abandoned me. But I didn't know 90 minutes felt like 20 hours. So all that depression and anxiety mixed in with the military, mixed in with the identity crisis of the camouflage, the brotherhood, the camaraderie that that's special. Like, to want to die, give your life for a person next to you. Like, not everybody experienced that. And so I had to figure out what was next. Like, okay, your career's over. You got 24 years. You got these MOSs. The military says you're medical retired, so you can't do none of these jobs. What am I going to do? And I saw an opportunity with that sickle cell trait gene. And a mental health provider, Ashley Benjamin, looked at my records and he says, "What are you going to do when you retire?" I says, "You know what? I have an idea about a sports brand called What's the Count? Maybe I'll sell some T-shirts or hats, or I'll sit on the dock of the bay and watch the tides roll away and whistle." That was my retirement song. So he showed me this book that he written with his colleagues, and about a student athlete book from high school to college. And he had 2 pages of sickle cell trait exertion with athletes. And he's like, "Read this." So I'm reading and I'm crying. I'm like, "You know what happened to me?" He's like, "Oh yeah, it happens a lot. it either gets misdiagnosed or it gets deemed as something else, or people die. He says, so you can become an advocate. I'm like, what's an advocate? He's like, you could actually share your story about what happened to you in the military and use your hats and t-shirts, and that money from your hats and t-shirts could pay for you to travel around the world and speak. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And so like from that cartoon character, you know, when the light bulb comes on the cartoon character, like from that moment on, it was like, I know what I need to be doing. And so staying up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, wanted to take my life, I started looking now at the sickle cell trait conversation. I started doing research, and I started looking to see how I could share my story. And I found a lot of people who have died and lost their children playing football. And so that was what I put in place of my military identity and to become this advocate. And he was right. I've been able to speak to people and just share my testimony and share my story that has impacted people's lives and saved some lives. So that whole what's next in our military community, I think that is something that is also important to discuss, because after that uniform is done, again, if you don't know who you are as a person, I introduce myself as Sergeant First Class Farron Dozier all the time. Like, so I could tell you my identity shifted from E4 to E5. When I became sergeant, it was like pride, and that, you know, it was all of that came with that. And again, being forced out of the service when I wasn't ready, my identity was all in that camouflage. And so to be able to now, 8 years later, reflect and start to peel off those layers, it allows me to connect with people at many levels now, because as a veteran suicide, we know is way more than 22 a day. We know that veteran, I'm advocating for arthritis, and there was a study from the Arthritis Foundation that a great percentage of veterans deal with arthritis and health issues when they get out of service. So it's like all these health complications that we deal with. I mean, I was young. You don't go to sick call. You soldier through your pain. You know, all that stuff, that you mental toughness, but then your body's breaking down, and you're like, I'm not going to the doctor. Like, I'm not going. It'll go away. Like, no, like you need to go and get some help.
Well, so, for the record, I didn't soldier through anything. I marined through it. So just to make sure that's
you know what? You warriors are something else, let me tell you. So yeah, that's kind of how I got in front of you today. 8 years later, I still manage my anxiety and my depression, because once you open up that box, you have to figure out what tools to keep you alive. And we've discovered putting something in place and the willingness to stay alive, which is what's next. And if we can help veterans figure out what's your purpose, what's your passion, what do you care about, what's your hobby? Like, this whole podcasting started for me in my depression. And a friend of mine was like, you should do a sports show, because I was a huge sports fan. But in my depression, I lost interest in, like I said, in life, and a lot of things, and sports went with it. And so Blog Talk in 2009, you know, and here it is, you know, almost 11 years later, and I'm still, that whole podcasting back then was brand new, kind of. And, you know, it's taking me now to a KCA radio, where I'm on AM, FM, 2 FM stations and the AM station, still sharing my message and now reaching out to people to help them discover. Like, you can't tell people what their problems are, but you can definitely share your story. And if they're willing to look in their own life, they're willing to see, hey, you know what? I have something similar like that. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Like, I can't tell you what your problems are, even though I could probably hear, and I could hear them. Like, we out of the heart comes, you know, our issues of life. And so when you can hear people talk, and you can hear that they're telling you exactly what they're dealing with. And so to be able to be educated in that part of life now, and be able to have a different way to listen to people, it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing to find my spirituality. So 3 things I live by now that keeps me from jumping off the roof. I did go to the VA and do cognitive behavior. So when people say you need mental health, you do. Like when I went to the VA just recently and did the cognitive behavior classes, when you unravel the thought before the thought, like the body sensations, the body keeps, like all that stuff is real talk. Like the body keeps the score. A body sensation can trigger the thought, and then you act on it. So when I went to the VA and did those cognitive behavior classes, it really showed me that I can't react to what was in my mind all the time. Like I have to question it. You have to almost question everything before even you speak it, because it's past history, it's issues, it's things in life that we have proof on. And that really was the icing on the cake. For me, was the cognitive behavior. The landmark education definitely kept me alive. It taught me how to be a better human, how to be responsible. And then also it brought up, what's your purpose? Like after you made up that story that your life was over, so now what are you here for? What's your purpose? And so that where the advocate came from. And then with that, my purpose, well, I grew up in church, so I went to the Bible. So then it brought me to my spirituality. So those are the three things that I've grounded myself in today, that when I do feel like I'm done, like I don't want to be here no more, I remember there's a whole community of people. There's 300 million people globally with sickle cell trait who don't know, and more, who have no idea that this can cause health problems. There are babies being born with sickle cell disease because the two parents don't know that they have that gene, and then they have a child that has a disease that has no cure in life. So is that bigger than Farron? Yeah, it's way bigger than Farron. So all these different aspects keep me like, okay, I might wake up in pain and can't walk, but then I remember there's somebody else out there that I could probably touch. You know, I could probably touch a life or give some information to, and that keeps me alive. Honestly,
that's what it's all about, brother. That's both a amazing and inspiring story. We do have a few folks who are saying hi, so we want to hi to Amy. She does say that she soldiers through also.
See, she knows what I'm talking about.
But I will throw back at her. Her husband's a Marine and her dad's a Marine, so balance the scales.
God. All right, Amy, I tried.
Got to throw it. And then Kristen, you got some fan love out there. And also
thank you.
Ron Audrey says thanks for sharing. Your true hero.
Thank you. So the things today, and what I wanted to reach out to you when I saw your podcast, I'm working with a Korean era veteran. His name is Caldwell Williams. He's about to be 87, and he has been. He's a graduate from UCLA. Was a career counselor, but he's on a path of altering veteran suicide, and he has a curriculum. I sat with him for like the last 2 years now. I've been working with him and mentoring with him. And exclusion and inclusion is his principles. And even if you look at the empirical truths of today, this whole pandemic, they talk about the catching COVID and all that, but do they talk about the suicide rates that have increased with young women and teenagers? And so the whole exclusion piece of that is, we're social beings. We're human beings. We're social. I grew up, punishment, go to your room, right? That's the worst thing you could do to a human being, is exclude them from the family or exclude them from, the group. So what happens is exclusion creates silent traumas on the brain, the limbic system, where emotions and short-term memory is centered. So when I share with you about me growing up as a child and the issues I had with my parents, those were silent traumas that I didn't know what was going on. And then you look at it fast forward to even today, where people who have to be at home by themselves this last year, and that subconscious mind is giving them the business on all the mistakes that you made in your past. And then the future of uncertainty is what partly anxiety creates. So you live so far in the future that you can't control it, which creates the anxiety. And then you have depression, which is stuff that happened to you in the past. So a lot of people live with both, which is I did, because I was mad at myself for sprinting that morning, but I didn't know that. So from 2006 until 2012, I was mad at myself, but I didn't know it was because if I didn't sprint, I could have still been in the military. I was passed with 16 minutes. I had 17:21 to pass. I was going to pass the test regardless. So all that stuff in my mind, my subconscious mind, is blaming me for sprinting that morning. So I didn't know that until one of my landmark coaches says, "Hey, you ever forgave yourself?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, go sit on that." And when he said that, it's like, okay, I have to continue to forgive myself for sprinting because I blame myself for ending my career. And then I was living so far in the future that what was going to happen to my house, my finances, like, am I going to have to sell? Like all that stuff is a future. So comparing that to today is why exclusion is such a core principle in that conversation, because people are dealing with these same kind of human experiences causing the suicide numbers to go up, not just with military, but also as civilians. So that mental health piece is really important as a human being function, not just labeling us as veterans or homeless. And that's another thing, objectification. We objectify each other. And I believe it's taught to us as a survival skill as a child, because your parents tell you, don't go over here, don't play with these people, don't do this. And so the brain can't tell the difference between real and an imaginary threat. So when you grow up and you have all this experiences and you're trying to be safe and your body's trying to keep you alive, we objectify people. And the military, they do it well, because they take that young soldier, they take us, our malleable minds, and that human being becomes a terrorist. The human being becomes the enemy. And then we're trained, and you can now kill that terrorist. But at some point, your brain's going to remember one day, oh, that was a person. And then you have to be able to deal with that. So objectification is a label that we do. It desensitizes us from one another. If you're a Laker fan or a Clipper fan, people have killed each other from wearing a jersey because they were a fan of another team. That's objectification. That's what's happening in this whole black and white and all these things that our society is dealing with, because we objectify each other by a color or where you're from, that it desensitizes. Well, you're not connected to me because you're black, or you're white, or you're Army, you're Marine, or you're homeless, or you're this. And that label hinders us from connecting. So inclusion and exclusion is something that we want to teach, and he's done it already. He's done it in the 60s. He's done it for 5 decades, from healing youth from committing suicide to healing corporations with their bottom line and bringing, healing the employees. And now he's been out healing veterans. And so that's how I met him, with his curriculum. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to have that conversation with veterans, they're empirical truths. You don't have to go study it. If you look in your life, you could probably see a similar version of that. And if you talk from that, there's where the connectedness. I stopped using the word understand, because if I try to understand you, I'm only listening to what I can connect to, and I'm throwing everything else away that you say. But if I listen to relate to you, then I could hear something that, oh, what? Hey, wait a minute. That sounds like this. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's what that is? Okay, so now it furthers the dialogue. So there's a lot of conversations. Mental health is definitely the key, but we have to be able to go back and teach foundation skills, communication skills, achievement skills, especially, like I said, transitioning from the military. We have that whole experience bottled up inside of our subconscious mind, and we train how we fight. And for those who went to combat, you have that extra added experience on top of that. And then now your identity is back out, in civilian world, which there is a conversation in the military that civilians don't understand us. They don't understand us. So you have all that in your mind. trying to now figure out how am I going to maneuver my life now. And then, from our experiences, families are impacted. The children are impacted. The wife is impacted. The husband's impacted. The grandparents, like everybody's impacted by that soldier life experience in his career. And I just believe that we can teach foundation skills. We can heal past experiences, sort them out. Yes, they happen, but who are you today? Like, yes, you can acknowledge what happened, but then what about today? Who are you today? Is that happening today? No. Then okay, so then who do you want to be today? I love Nike, but Nike got it out of place. You don't just do it. You can't just do it. We're human beings, not human doings. So the human experience is just as much as important as the activity that we do. We bring happiness to these activities. You can generate that peace no matter where you are. But if you don't know that, if you have proof that that's not available or possible, I think that's the break in communication and in dialogue and that mental health piece, that you can't just give us medication. I heard a guy yesterday gets a shot in the back of his head to numb his depression and anxiety. So they're sticking needles in the head, shooting fluids or cortisone or whatever to numb that part of the brain. And it's like, come on. So when I saw what you did for your show, I was like, okay, let me see if I could, reach out. I have a show called Trench Talk, is what I dedicate my military conversation to. I've been doing that since 2013. But Trench Talk, I've had in my head almost my whole career, because we'd be out on a convoy and, you get done delivering the ammunition and the food or supplies, and you got trucks, we all park and we're just under the stars at like 2 o'clock in the morning, radio's playing, and you hear guys that you meet from all parts of the country, different backgrounds. And that Trench Talk kind of just stuck in my brain. Like, I never knew what it was going to be, but I always had this vision of that word, that phrase, Trench Talk. And it turned out to be my personal therapy to stay connected to veterans. And if you're as old as I am, you ever dug a foxhole? You ever dug a foxhole? So you never dug a real foxhole to the bottom of your armpit, huh? You never done that?
No, you're only 25.
Yeah, and they didn't allow us to do that at the hospital to get really upset if we break up the floor.
So we dug foxholes. So I believe all that Trench Talk kind of came in all of that experience of my service, and so it's been a blessing to be able to reach out to people, share just my views and my perspective, and hopefully somebody who listens discovers what they're dealing with and their own version of it. Because like, again, you can't tell people what to do, but you can definitely share your story. And if they're willing to look in their life and take responsibility for their part of it, we can be victims and play the blame game. But at some point, I learned responsibility from a principle of no fault and no blame. Like, I'm just going to be responsible for my life today and own my past. And if we can teach, if I can learn at 40 years old, when I was 40 years old, 10 years ago, if I could do it, and I met millions of people and people who have taken this education that have done that, if that's just that first piece of I don't want to say healing, but discovery, Caldwell calls it awakening. His program gives you that awakening to those empirical truths. You can grow. Most of us was 19, 20 inches when we were born. Now I'm almost 6'3". So you can't tell me that I can't grow. We're talking in a language that we wasn't born to speak. So you can't tell me you can't learn. So we're not too old to grow or learn in the perspective and the perception of our mental capacity. And so understanding that and developing those skills, just as much as now I have a 2-year-old grandson, I tell you that I broke the cycle from my parents, my grandparents, I don't like that phrase, generational curses. But again, if you look in your life, as we either parent how we were parented, or we parent the opposite, which gives you the same end result because you're trying to avoid what happens to you, to your children. And those are the kind of little things that the human experience, it really plays a huge part because we're human beings, and that experience is way more valuable sometimes than to just do it. You could just do it frustrated, or you could just do it happy and at peace. And if you don't put those in perspective, you'll be living life frustrated and not knowing why am I always pissed off? Well, because you're being a way that generates that, but there's something underneath all of that. Well, what's underneath all that? What's the core of that being pissed off? A lot of it is I don't talk to my mom. I don't talk to my dad. I mean, you look at the prison system, a lot of those young men just wanted the attention from their parents. They just wanted the attention from their father. So if you're not going to give it to me in a positive way, you're going to pay attention to this way. But then it costs their life. So we believe, and I believe that if we help heal, we call them mama issues and daddy issues. We label them different things in life. Those are real stories. Those are real things that people are dealing with. And we believe if you help manage and heal those areas, that person's life starts to open up, and then they could figure out who they are for themselves and not be stuck in some, does my mom care about me? Does my dad didn't love me? And all these things that again, you have no idea what your parents, most of our parents was 19 to 25 years old when we were born. And look back in your life when you were those ages, and what did you know about life? And just that alone could give some compassion to your parents and ask more questions about what they were doing. What were you dealing with when I was born? Like, what was going on in your life? Then as an adult, you can see that. But imagine we could teach a 12-year-old that. Imagine we could teach an 8-year-old that, to do that then, instead of waiting till they're 30 or 40 years old. They will have less stuff to heal from if we get the youth at a younger age. And 8 years old, you can have these kind of conversations. My first decision about my dad was 5. The next one about my mom was 8. My one with my peers was 14. So if my dad doesn't love me and I can't trust my mother, and then my peers, I can't trust a girlfriend. It's like, how do you imagine your life looks? It's like wearing yellow sunglasses for 20 years, and then one day you take them off. It's not yellow outside. It's like, that's the kind of discovery that happens when you find that level of peace. So I'm grateful.
Farron, go ahead.
I was just going to say, thank you for sharing your story today. It's amazing. I thank you so much. I mean, when we started this, we wanted people to be able to come on here and talk about things and get more people involved to help vets. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that story today. Yeah, and the other thing is, it's really bad when we get a radio person on, because they can talk forever.
I was like, wait a minute, we could just all drop off here and let.
Hey, sorry.
This is Farron's helping the brave. No, but that gentleman, we'd love to have him on the show. So if you could get us connected with him, that'd be great.
I will definitely set that up. I'll go when we schedule it. I'll go there because he's kind of challenged, technology challenge. But we can set that up, and I'll go there and help him pull the computer up and pull the link up and be there when he does that. So
Kristen's really good with that too. So if you want somebody else,
I'm the best at it.
So Farron, is the best way for people to reach out to you through your website on the screen?
That is perfect. It will take them to all of my platforms, my awareness nonprofit organization, my talk show. I created an inspirational read called Life of a 5-Year-Old. My dad passed away in 2019. And so I was glad that I had took that landmark education at 40, because the last 8 years of our life, I saw who I was being with my dad. Like, he did love me, but he got on my nerve, and I would treat him as such to a terrible way. And when I discovered that at 40, that I was being upset and angry and frustrated with my dad, I committed to being gratitude, acknowledgement, and joy with my dad. So imagine going from being upset to being that experience with my father. It opened up our relationship, and it actually healed our relationship. So when he passed away in 2019, I have no resentment. I have no regret. Everything that needed to be said was said every time we communicated. And if I did go off on him, I caught myself and I apologize. So being able to do that work, I miss his humanness and the music that he taught me. So a lot of my stuff is dedicated. Even I got the sickle cell trait from my dad. So my dad is in my life and in my conversation, everything that I get to accomplish now, because our fathers are our foundations of our homes. I mean, there really are, and the Bible even talks about it. Honor your father and mother that you may have long life. That is a real promise. If you believe in those commandments, that is a real promise. And that's why being able to heal that relationship with our parents first is so important, and who you get to be with other people. Because if you can't talk to your mom and dad, how do you expect to have a fruitful relationship with people? If you don't trust your mama, you don't think that impacts you trusting women. Like that, it all ties together to our most important people of our life is our parents. And if I could help heal that or discover that, my sickle cell trait is important, but I really want to help people discover their relationship with their parents and heal that, because that is really a lot of the root of the issues of our nation is the broken homes of our parents. And even if you had both parents, some parents give you money, but that child wants affection and that child wants connection, inclusion, not exclusion. So a lot of the things that we're dealing with in our nation, flaws, are core issues of our homes. And if I could share that just as much as my conversation, I believe that could start to heal relationships.
Well, thank you, Farron, for coming on tonight. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
And it's amazing because we have had many other people on here and they've had things that happen to them, and then they come along and say, this is why this happened to me, so that I could do this. And it's amazing that we finally, because people say you find your why along the way. It seems like you found your why and what you want to do with it, and we want to help you. So if there's anything we can do for you, let us know.
Yeah, and I believe if we help veterans do that, that could again interrupt that willingness to not want to live, and help them find what's next. And it's all in the conversation. It's all in a hobby, but they have to be willing to want to look there too, though. That's where the relatedness and the story sharing comes into play, because you just never know, the next broadcaster or the next, app creator. Like, you just never know. There's the grave site is the richest place on the planet, because all the dreams and books died with those people. And so we don't want that to happen anymore.
No.
So thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you. And this is, our movement. We're trying to get this bigger and bigger and do some other things. So please stay connected with us.
I will do one in return. I will have each one of you on my Trench Talk segment. That way you can share who you are and what you're up to. And I'll do that in return. I have no problem doing that. So
sounds great.
I'll invite you to be on my show as well.
Okay.
All right. Appreciate it, Farron. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. You did the whole show. We just had to sit here and drink our coffee.
You don't have any questions?
I think you're so used to doing this. You answer all the questions along the way. It's like you've done the perfect story. You've known people are going to say, hey, what about this? And you go, oh, you answer it before we can even ask it.
Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in tonight, and see you next time.
Yes. Thank you, Farron.
Farron, you can hang on the line real quick.